Let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Travis Hamilton, and I'm 39 years old. I have light brown hair, still free of gray, and I stand at 6 feet 2 inches. I weigh 200 pounds and have green eyes. I consider myself a practical man, though not one to pick fights. I value hard work, honesty, and loyalty. Throughout my life, I've aimed to be a good husband, father, and provider, someone dependable, reliable, reserved, and reasonably intelligent. My wife, Lorna Hamilton, formerly Dixon, embodies everything one could desire. She stands 5 feet 6 inches tall, is a healthy 37, with blue eyes and long blonde hair. She maintains a weight of 130 pounds and has a figure I would describe as a 36C. Lorna possesses both beauty and allure, complemented by her poise and personality, or at least, she did, until she expressed a desire for a divorce. I can't claim to be entirely surprised by the confrontation and her request for a divorce. After all, we've been married long enough to raise 3 children together. Our eldest child, Alex, is already in college on a full scholarship at Rutgers, pursuing his interest in quantum mechanics. Admittedly, I never truly believed in a place called Rutgers until Alex received his scholarship there. The concept of quantum mechanics remains a puzzle to me. While I'd like to brag about his brilliance, truthfully, he's self-sufficient with his mother's support and his own outspoken nature. He's my son, my flesh and blood, though I can't say he's my favorite person. He's always been a mama's boy through and through. Our second child, Sarah, takes after me in appearance, unlike Alex who favors his mother. Sarah, however, has quite an attitude. Some might say she's arrogant, believing she's beyond reproach. She inherited her smarts from her mother and brother, but she can also be self-centered, narrow-minded, and egotistical. Sarah recently completed her senior year and decided to take a hiatus to find herself, whatever that entails. She's accomplished a lot: homecoming queen, local beauty pageant winner, straight-A student, and class valedictorian. When I say she's done it all, I mean just about everything, or everyone, as it turns out. Last fall, while cleaning out her nearly new Honda Accord, a car I purchased for her, I stumbled upon evidence suggesting she'd been quite active socially. By the way, I own an auto body shop where we specialize in repairs, everything from fixing wrecked front ends and replacing transmissions to aligning tires and cleaning vehicle interiors. Here's a revised version that maintains the essence while ensuring clarity and appropriateness. Returning to Sarah, I decided to tidy up her car, fill the tank, change the oil, and put on new tires, typical dad duties. While checking her glove compartment for insurance and registration cards, I stumbled upon something unexpected: a whole bag of condoms. I put them back and went inside to share my discovery with Lorna, my wife at the time. Lorna responded casually, "So what?" She's been on the pills since 9th grade. I was shocked to realize my daughter might be more sexually active than I had assumed. Even more unsettling was her plan to attend the University of Hawaii to learn to surf and get away from home. Personally, I couldn't think of 2 better reasons to go to college. Can anyone? For those wondering about our location, we live south of the Mason-Dixon line, north of the Potomac River, and east of the Chesapeake Bay. That should narrow it down. Now on to our youngest, Cable. He's in 12th grade, about to turn 18. He didn't bother with the SATs and lacks any ambition, much to the frustration of Lorna, our other kids, and myself. Despite standing 6 feet 3 inches tall, Cable wants to stay home and help me run the auto body shop. He shares my passion for cars, which is both endearing and disappointing. As for me, well, I'm nearly done. I'm not highly educated, but I do run my own successful business. I've managed to set up college funds for all my kids, buy a nice house, cover everyone's expenses, and remember to keep the oil in the heating system during winter. Sometimes, I wonder how a guy like me managed it all. Then there's Lorna, my once-loving wife who's now on the brink of leaving. We met in high school, where we had an on and off relationship. She's 2 years younger than me, I'm 39, and she's 37. After I graduated, we drifted apart. She found someone taller, stronger, smarter, and better looking than me, a real catch. They hit it off, and before long, she was pregnant. She called me 3 months into her pregnancy, crying about how Mr. Wright had heard rumors that she was less than virtuous. I knew that already. One of his friends even suggested, why marry her? She's just another fling. He was right, but that's why Lorna, in her distress, turned to me. She needed a man, a real man. I guess I was a bit of a sucker, but I still loved her. I was just starting my business, and though it was tough going, I was determined to succeed. I may not have been book smart, but I knew cars, I knew mechanics, and most importantly, I knew people, well, most people, anyway. I learned early from my late father, may he rest in peace, that a good man refrains from speaking ill of others. He believed in keeping personal opinions to oneself and emphasized the importance of trust and respect. He taught me that trust builds relationships. People will work with you and forgive minor mistakes if they trust you to deliver on important matters. My early years in business were challenging, but I earned the trust of the community. If I couldn't handle a job, I was upfront about it. When uncertain, I sought second opinions, even at a cost, because gaining respect led to gaining clients. I married Lorna under unexpected circumstances. Initially, she believed she was pregnant, or perhaps she decided against it. Frankly, I wasn't paying close attention. Regardless, I ended up with a wife who had once aimed for a career and marrying into wealth, only to find herself with a grease monkey like me. Lorna, a former top student with plans for college and a prosperous future, had her plans derailed by a relationship with Mr. Right. Instead of wealth, she found herself married to me, a mechanic. Despite realizing she wasn't pregnant, Lorna chose to stay with me rather than return to her affluent, but stifling, parental home. Despite everything, I loved her enough to support her college dreams. We had children, and I hired Cassie, a capable assistant who managed the shop's operations and cared for our kids. Cassie, a biracial woman with a black father and white mother, was indispensable to our family and business. Despite societal labels, I valued her for her competence and reliability, not for her racial identity. While Lorna pursued her degree through night classes, Cassie became integral to our household. However, amidst this, Cassie's personal life became private. She became pregnant around the same time Lorna did with Cable, our youngest child. Years have passed, and now my wife wants to leave me. Well, good riddance to her. I have 3 kids, 20, 19, and almost 18. There's also Cassie, a single mom who's been my right-hand woman both at the shop and at home. Her daughter, Jeannie, is nearly 18. I know this story might be dragging, but it's mine to tell. I want to talk about Jeannie. She's 17, soon turning 18, and attends the same private school as Sarah. While our boys attended public school, Lorna insisted on Sarah going to St. Timothy's since kindergarten, preferring its environment over the local public school. Jeannie has been there too, thanks to her mom's efforts to afford it. Sarah and Jeannie have been best friends in secret all their lives. Sarah can't publicly have a black best friend. Anyone who looks at Jeannie can tell her dad must be white. If Cassie, with her hazel eyes and reddish hair, looks white, then Jeannie is practically indistinguishable from a white girl, with green eyes, fair skin, and light brown wavy hair. Jeannie resembles someone well known in town, but it's a topic no one wants to broach, and frankly, I'm glad for the silence. Cassie and Jeannie have been part of my household for many years. Now, back to the situation at hand. After finishing her undergraduate studies, Lorna set her sights on law school. Opting for out-of-state education in Delaware, I arranged an apartment in Wilmington for her. The plan was for her to attend law school there and try to come home as often as possible. Law school takes a few years, and soon Lorna was primarily based in Wilmington, only part-time with us. We adjusted. Cassie and Jeannie moved in permanently with me, Sarah, and Cable. They had already been living with us for years, each in their own rooms. Between Cassie, Jeannie, and Sarah's help, the household ran more smoothly than ever, certainly better than when Lorna was home and in charge. Now, onto the real deal. Lorna graduated from law school, completed all the necessary steps to become licensed, and found a job in Salisbury at a newly established firm by someone named Bernie Taylor. Starting to see the picture more clearly now? Damn well better be. Bernie isn't exactly a saint, especially in his legal practice. He's what you might call an ambulance chaser. Interestingly, Taylor isn't his real surname. He was born Bernie Goldstein. Get it? I'm not prejudiced. I have two African American women living in my house, grown women, actually. At work, a black woman manages my day-to-day operations, and to be honest, she handles most of my home's bookkeeping too. Think about it. Cassie, my capable assistant, manages both my business and household finances. Since Jeannie started high school, Cassie has taken charge of all our household accounts. I trust Cassie with my life. Plus, my top mechanic is Kevin, who is also black. When I visit the tavern, I sit where the black guys sit. Do I sound prejudiced? I don't think so. But Bernie bothers me a bit. I don't personally know any Jewish people, but I've heard stories. Ever heard of someone being polished or Germaned out of their money? Has anyone been Irished or Englished down on a deal? Bernie Taylor, yeah, right. Here's what I found out about Bernie. He's 46 and has had some shady deals that got him kicked out of Baltimore. He's been divorced twice, a real serial divorcer. He's skilled at getting a divorce and probably knows a good lawyer to get him off the hook. I've also heard both his ex-wives were non-Jewish women, shiksas, as they say. Apparently, he marries a Gentile, enjoys himself, and then finds a Jewish lawyer to help him divorce the goy. I read all this on the internet. Bernie's not a bad guy, really. He's on the shorter side, maybe 5 feet 8 inches, and a bit overweight with a noticeable belly. Honestly, I kind of like the guy. He's funny and easy to get along with, I guess. Now, let's get to the point. I bet everyone's thinking, finally. Lorna landed a job with Bernie Taylor, who was already building a solid client base when she joined. Bernie was single, and her job was an hour and a half away from home. At first, I didn't think much of it. I worked until 6, sometimes 6:30, each evening and put in half-days on Saturdays. At the shop, Sarah wasn't much help when she showed up, but Jeannie started hanging around regularly during her senior year. It worked out well. Cable would join us right after school. Remember, Cable's my youngest, and Jeannie is Cassie's daughter. Jeannie would arrive around the same time each day. Cassie worked until about 4:30, then headed to my house to prepare dinner. Lorna usually got home around 7, and we'd gather at the table to chat. The kids, Cassie, and I ate earlier, but it was nice to sit with Lorna and listen to her talk about her work as a lawyer. Neither Cassie nor I understood much of what she was saying, but it was enjoyable to hear her stories. During the day at the shop, we'd reflect on all the things Lorna had done. It was fun. Cassie and I would often sit together at a small table in the back of the shop. We'd enjoy sandwiches she made, maybe snack on her homemade cookies, sip coffee, and chat. I loved watching her expressions as she talked, always dressed in pretty blouses with delicate wrists and tiny hands. I bought her a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a seahorse pendant that I loved seeing dangled between her breasts. Oh, and a bracelet, a wristwatch, and several sets of earrings. So what? Jeannie was always hanging around the shop, curious about what the mechanics were doing. It was fun. Cassie and I would sit in the office, watching Cable and Jeannie tease each other while working on cars. They were always close by, and we never thought much of it. Jeannie is really beautiful, resembling her mother. She and Cable hit it off well. They're very close. I mean, really close. After a while, Cassie and I started worrying a bit, but we figured that with Cable being white and Jeannie being, well, how she is, they wouldn't take it anywhere serious. Just looking at her, you'd think she was white. It only shows up when you look closely. Honestly, and without favoring one over the other, I think the differences people see between black and white girls are a bit overblown. When I look at Jeannie, her mom, and I see two of the most beautiful human beings imaginable. But back to the story. Some strange things started happening. Lorna began arriving home later and later. Sometimes, she'd even stay overnight in Salisbury. That bothered me a bit, but Cassie and I realized we had another concern. Cable and Jeannie were getting serious. It wasn't just puppy love anymore. Cable had a car, an old Chevrolet Malibu with reclining seats, and access to my Ford pickup truck with its long bed and extended cab. Cassie and I used that pickup too. She's tiny. If she doesn't push the seat all the way up, her feet barely touch the floor. I always took pride in keeping it spotless. It was an older vehicle, and I think many customers liked that I kept such vehicles, believing it showed my ability to care for things. Cassie and I stayed up late at night often, worrying about our kids. Sometimes, we'd get really absorbed, sitting on the sofa, munching on popcorn, and watching TV. Once, Cassie confided in me, "Travis, I don't want Jeannie getting too involved with cable. It scares me." I nodded in agreement. "Cassie, it scares me too. You know how much I care for our girl, your girl, Jeannie. I don't want her to get hurt. I think we can trust cable, but..." Cassie interrupted, "You know what the problem is. I fell in love with a certain white boy in this town, and you know how that turned out." I sighed. "Cassie, I'm sorry about that. I wish there was a way I could fix things for you." She smiled at me warmly, the kind of smile that always melted me. "Travis, I'm just glad you're here. I'm glad we've been together. I don't know how things would have turned out if..." Sometimes, I had to silence her with a kiss. Cassie was incredibly sweet. That night, I kissed her and she kissed me back. Her lips were the sweetest, her kisses the most tender. It had happened before, but that night felt special. I sometimes wish. She placed her fingers on my lips, a gesture she had done before, so I wasn't surprised. "Life isn't always fair," she said softly. I had to look away, overwhelmed with emotions. Lorna had been spending more and more time away from home. Cassie and I began to suspect something. While worrying about cable and Jeannie was already a lot, Lorna being out late at night was just too much. Cassie had been observing how Lorna had been treating me lately. I had noticed some changes too, but I thought it was just her job. We were in the kitchen, preparing chili for ourselves and the kids. Lorna had called to say she'd be staying in Salisbury again, mentioning a big settlement meeting in the morning. Cassie was carefully preparing the chili, knowing I had a sensitive stomach due to what doctors called irritable bowel syndrome. She was always mindful of what I ate. Cable and Sarah preferred their chili with a lot of pepper, while Jeannie and I liked it milder. Lorna liked it spicy. Cassie said, "Have you noticed how short Lorna's been with you lately?" "Yeah, you've noticed it too?" I replied. Cassie rested her head on my shoulder, and I caught a whiff of her Chanel Chance perfume, which smelled particularly pleasant. Lorna used a strong fragrance, something from Elizabeth Taylor that I never cared for. Cassie said, "I think it's disrespectful." Looking down at her, her hazel eyes captivating me as her wavy hair cascaded down her back, I said, "Maybe we shouldn't be too hard on her. She's working hard." Cassie smiled at me and teasingly replied, "Yeah, sure, my big handsome man, duh." She sometimes called me that after we watched an old movie on TV where Opie Cunningham called his dad my big handsome man. Cassie used it to tease me. I glanced back at her. "You better watch it or I'll have to." Cassie giggled and playfully backed away. Just then, Cable and Jeannie walked in. Cable joked, "Are you going to spank Jeannie's mom again?" Jeannie asked, puzzled, "Your dad spanks my mom?" Cable laughed, and I felt myself blushing. I glanced at Cassie. She was blushing too. The kids didn't stay long. As soon as they left, I turned to Cassie. "You never..." She looked at me seriously. "No, I never said anything." Then, her expression turned grave. "Did you see, they were holding hands?" I knew I must have paled because Cassie looked genuinely concerned. I said urgently, "We can't let them." She cut me off. "I know." Then her tone shifted. "What about your wife?" Cassie said your wife in that particular way she used when she disapproved. I knew I had to respond, but anything I said would hurt the person I loved more than anyone else in the world, except maybe the kids. I just shrugged and suggested, "After dinner, let's watch some TV." Cassie glanced at me. "Hallmark has a good movie tonight." It was odd. Lorna always enjoyed crime dramas, while Cassie and I leaned towards Hallmark movies. I agreed, "Sure. Want to make some popcorn?" She flashed that sweet smile. "I'll pop the corn. You get us each a soda." After dinner, we set aside thoughts of Lorna and the kids and spent the evening on the couch watching something with Andy McDowell. I wasn't really paying attention. Cassie had her head on my lap, where it usually rested when we watched TV. I couldn't remember when it wasn't like that. Bernie organized an office party for one of his secretaries who got engaged. He invited everyone's children, so Sarah, Jeannie, and Cable attended. Since Lorna had become quite prominent in her office, Cassie went along as a sort of nanny. The party was held outdoors at an old mansion Bernie had rented for the occasion. He arranged for both a small jazz band and a country music group. Cassie and I gravitated towards the country music area. I noticed Lorna with her lawyer friends by the jazz band. The bands alternated, so there wasn't much interference between them. I liked jazz, but country was more my style. Knowing Cassie's fondness for female country singers, I tried to spark a conversation about it. I asked her, "Who's your favorite country artist right now?" Cassie, unfazed by her race, shared her opinion on country music. "You know, I think Taylor Swift has been a bit over the top lately. Right now, my favorite is Miranda Lambert." I chuckled. "This ain't my mama's broken heart." She laughed too. "I guess you're a Blake Shelton fan?" I exaggerated a frown. "No way. I still stick with Brad Paisley." That made Cassie blush. She playfully whistled and teased, "Am I going to have to splash water on you again?" That was a reference to our last fishing trip. We had taken a blanket, and I had dozed off when she sneaked up and poured water over my head. I grinned. "You remember what that got you?" Cassie glanced around mischievously. "Are you going to toss me in the pool?" That reminded me of the time I playfully carried her to the edge of the lake after she had splashed me. She was furious, but had to spend 20 minutes fixing her hair, which got all tangled due to her mixed heritage. I thought about it and grinned. "No, but I might do it when we get home," referring to the pool we had in our backyard, which I'd playfully pushed Cassie into several times over the years. Cassie scanned the crowd. "There must be close to 100 people here." Looking around, I agreed, "Yeah, but I don't see Lorna anywhere." Cassie was also searching. "I don't see her lawyer friend either," then added mischievously, "Want to go on a treasure hunt?" I asked, "What do you think we'll find?" She replied, "I don't know, but I'd rather be the one to find the treasure than any of the kids." Off we went. It didn't take us long. After walking around the yard and not spotting them, we decided to check inside the house. As we passed through and headed back towards the main yard, Cassie heard something. Cassie whispered, "Listen." I halted. We both heard it. They had found a secluded corner she'd used for storing towels and such. It didn't look very spacious. We started towards it. Cassie stopped and pulled my arm back. "I don't think we should." I stopped and whispered, "Come on, Cassie. We both know about Lorna's time in law school in Wilmington. This isn't anything new." Cassie looked fearful as she said, "Well, this time you'll catch her, and it will change everything." I took her hand. "It might." We walked quietly until we were close enough to hear. What we heard was pretty incriminating. Lorna was whispering, "More, more." Bernie mumbled, "Oh, oh." Then Lorna exclaimed, "Hurry up." We heard Bernie, "Oh my, oh shit, oh Jesus." I found it odd that a Jewish man would mention Christ in such a situation, but then we heard Lorna, "Come on, keep going. I'm not there yet." Bernie sighed, "Sorry, babe. I'm all used up." Cassie and I both thought we heard Lorna curse. I chuckled to myself, thinking, so the little guy can't quite keep it up. Cassie started to pull me away, but I held her back. "No, let's wait." A minute or two later, Bernie and Lorna stepped out of the shed. Bernie was still adjusting his pants and pulling up his suspenders, which looked rather comical since they were bright red. It reminded me of the old joke about a fireman and red suspenders. I should have been angry, indignant even, but I couldn't take it seriously. Bernie just looked ridiculous. Lorna's makeup was smudged, and her blouse was disheveled. When they saw us, they both froze. Then Lorna smiled, took Bernie's hand, and walked past us. Cassie looked at me. "What now?" I gazed back at her. She looked upset. I took both of her hands in mine. "Look, honey, this isn't something we didn't already suspect. I'll handle it when I get home." Cassie had tears in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she was happy or sad. She murmured softly, "It wasn't anything, me." I mean, then her emotions shifted from upset to guilt, though I couldn't fathom why she'd feel guilty. Suddenly, she seemed a bit angry, directing her frustration at me. Doesn't this make you just a little bit angry? I pulled her close and held her, feeling a deep appreciation for Cassie. You know, Cassie, I said, you're the only truly good person in all of this. Why should I be angry? Lorna and Bernie? Come on, I couldn't summon any anger. Why should I? I had who I wanted. Cassie started to cry. I comforted her. You go ahead to the truck. I'll be out there in a minute. Cassie and I had arrived at the party in my pickup truck. Jeannie, Sarah, and Cable had driven the Malibu. I wandered around the grounds until I found the kids near one of the kegs. You all haven't had too much, have you? Cable had his arm around Jeannie, Sarah holding her hand. It struck me as unusual. Cable replied, No, we're good. Jeannie's our designated driver. I informed them, Your mom and I are leaving now. Cable teased, Caught him, huh? Jeannie looked surprised, always the innocent one. Sarah smiled and turned to me, You didn't know, did you? I glanced down, admitting, Not exactly, not until today. Sarah encouraged me, Kick her to the curb, Dad. I was taken aback. Sarah urging me to cut ties with her mother? If anyone would defend Lorna, I thought it would be Sarah. You think so? Sarah interrupted firmly, Dad, you deserve better. Everyone knows who your real wife is. Jeannie looked around, puzzled. Who's that? Cable tightened his grip on Jeannie, exchanging a significant glance with Sarah before answering, I'll tell you later. Jeannie pressed, No, tell me now. Sarah draped an arm around Jeannie too, later, girl. You can wait a bit longer. I could sense Jeannie still didn't understand. Though I knew exactly who they meant, I told them, We'll see you back at the house, and left while Sarah and Cable continued their conversation with Jeannie. I thought, there's going to be a lot to sort out tonight. As I walked back to my truck, somehow I didn't feel remorseful. I had anticipated this day would come eventually. I was just relieved we were finally addressing it. I climbed into the truck. Cassie was already inside. I started it up and glanced over at her. The kids all know. I think Sarah and Cable know everything. Cassie gazed at me from across the seat, her expression a mix of fear and beauty. Her hair was casually styled in a loose bun, freshly done, and she wore no makeup, though I always thought she didn't need any. She asked softly, What about Jeannie? Reaching across, I pulled her closer despite the gap between our seats in the truck. I think Jeannie is completely innocent. I need to talk to Cable, find out what he knows. I'll confront Lorna first. Then we'll figure out what to do about Jeannie. Cassie gently touched my cheek. I leaned into her hand. Concerned, she asked, Are you okay? I mean, about Lorna? I smiled reassuringly. Oh yeah. She cupped my chin, searching my eyes. You sure? I pulled the truck to the side of the road, unbuckled her seatbelt, and pulled her onto my lap. I kissed her tenderly. Never been more sure. Cassie started to cry, hiccuping back her tears. Oh, Travis. I feel like a weight has been lifted. I kissed her again, feeling the weight lift off my own shoulders too. We both do. After letting her return to her seat, I restarted the truck and merged back onto the road. Throughout the drive, my mind raced. I had hired Cassie 19 years ago. Jeannie, now 17 and soon turning 18, was my daughter. Cassie knew it. Most people in town probably knew it. Maybe even Lorna knew it. Yes, I was the white guy everyone whispered about. Taking responsibility for Jeannie meant paying for her education at St. Tim's, providing for her as I did for Sarah. It had always been a secret. Even Cassie didn't know the full extent. She believed Jeannie had earned a scholarship, not realizing I had paid for everything: books, uniforms, field trips. I had arranged it so Cassie could buy Jeannie nice gifts for Christmas, birthdays, and Easter. But Cassie knew now. In truth, some of it was out of fear that Cassie might leave me. I had been so wrong. Cassie loved me deeply, and I loved her the same way. She was my angel. And Jeannie, like Sarah, was my angel too. Now we needed to explain everything to Cable and Jeannie. I was pretty sure Sarah already knew. I hoped Cable did too. But I wondered about Jeannie. How could she remain so innocent when the truth seemed so clear to everyone else? For 19 years, I had been married to the wrong woman while sharing my life with the right one. Now we could sort it all out. Yes, Lorna loved me in her own way, for the security, the free education, the freedom from her parents. But did she love me, Travis Hamilton? I doubted it. And did I ever truly love her, or was it just the idea of having her? Beside me was not just a girl, but a woman who had loved me fiercely, turning down other opportunities. That was why I had kept her close, why I had to keep her close. Hell, none of that ever mattered. Cassie stuck by me even though the only thing I'd ever promised her was a healthy 401k. She was there through thick and thin, never wavering. My angel, my caramel-skinned angel with those small breasts, auburn hair, and hazel eyes. I glanced over at her. Damn, I was unbelievably fortunate. No other woman would have stayed with me this long. Cassie had her own thoughts. I stole a glance at Travis across the truck. I kept wondering, was this the moment? Was this the time to confront everything that had transpired between us over the years? Travis, Lorna, and I all went to the same high school. I was a freshman when Travis was a senior. My mom is white and my dad is black, so I always felt like a mixed-up mess. Throughout elementary and middle school, I faced teasing, sometimes even cruelty from other kids. Maybe it's my imagination, but Travis always seemed to be around during those times. He wasn't a big jock or anything, just a regular guy, but other kids respected him. I soon found out why. I remember there was this big black guy, a real jock, who decided he wanted me to be his girlfriend. He was dark-skinned, over 6 feet 4 inches, and muscular, the starting center on the basketball team until he got cut due to bad grades and attendance. He targeted me, and I was scared of him. One day, he cornered me outside the cafeteria. And guess who showed up? Travis. He casually strolled over and told Daryl, that was his name, Daryl, leave the munchkin alone. Daryl looked like he wanted to punch Travis, but he didn't. Instead, he said, you think you're her type? Travis glanced at me, that thoughtful smile on his face. I knew that smile because I watched him all the time. He looked me up and down and replied, maybe she is. Daryl muttered something and walked away. I thought to myself, wow. I'm the munchkin. No, I'm Travis's munchkin. From then on, the Wizard of Oz had a special place in my heart. Was I in love back then? Travis walked up to me and asked, are you okay? I was so flustered, all I could do was nod. He smiled and started to walk away but turned back and said, you know, you're kind of cute. That was it. That sealed the deal. I knew then that I was going to marry him. Travis had always been honest and fair to everyone. I never heard anyone say a bad word about him. Later, when I got to spend more time around him, I saw for myself that he never spoke ill of others. He was probably the most decent person I had ever known. He was handsome back then, too. I look at him now, and he's a real man, all man, but he had that presence even when we were just kids. Maybe I'm biased, but that's how I see it. I remember his senior homecoming. Lorna was the queen, and she had some big guy with her all night. Travis seemed smitten with her, but he kept his emotions in check. I wanted him so badly. I convinced a friend to help me get him to ask me to dance. I mean, I was the mixed-race girl, right? He came right over and asked me to dance. We ended up dancing 3 more times. His arms around me felt strong. He smelled good too, like Old Spice, just as I thought. No flowery cologne for my Travis, he used a man's aftershave. I felt special, safe, and well, happy. That night, I fell even more in love with him. I was a good girl. I didn't give it away easily. I knew who I wanted. Okay, I manipulated him a bit. He was starting his business, and I found a way to get a job in his office. I hinted that having a black girl as his secretary would look good. To my surprise, he told me I wasn't just a black girl, I was a girl, a pretty girl, and he liked me. If I had any doubts before, they vanished then. I knew what I had to do. I had to become indispensable. And I did. I became his right-hand person. He arrived early, so did I. He worked late, so did I. I started working for him in my senior year. It was tough working after school until 7 or 8 in the evening, then going home to do homework, and waking up early the next day for school before returning to his shop in the afternoon. But I did it because I knew who I wanted. My mother had warned me not to trust white boys, saying they'd just use me. My dad worked all the time. I knew he loved me, but he was often too exhausted. He was a big man, and my mom, though tall, seemed small beside him. I had 3 younger brothers who were disciplined by my dad's tough rules. We all had to obey my mom, and backtalk wasn't tolerated. He treated my mom like she was a princess. I told my mom that Travis was like my dad. She didn't quite believe me then, and I think she still isn't sure. But my dad knew my plan all along. He's as cunning as I am, and he knew Travis was the right guy for me. I told my parents that I just had to fight for him. Now, my waiting was nearly over. I think back to my first year after high school. That's when everything changed, or rather, when he and I changed. He thought he had me, but it was me who had a plan all along. That night, he was exhausted and disappointed in Lorna. I was there for him, always knew she wasn't right for him. She had been unfaithful from the start of their marriage, but I never played games like that. I knew what I wanted, and getting pregnant was part of my plans to keep him. After that first time, he avoided me for a week, looking guilty. I had to confront him, afraid he'd fire me. But he didn't. I reassured him that what happened was what I wanted. It got easier after that, but he always had that silly, guilty look afterward for years. I want to say this, he's the only man I've been with, and I know he's the best. He's gentle, careful not to hurt me, always ensuring I'm satisfied before he stops. He's always put others first. When he got me pregnant, I thought things would escalate, but it was a scary time. He talked about confessing to his wife, but I convinced him not to. I promised to stay with him forever, and reluctantly, he agreed. I feared losing him, but I also knew then that he loved me, truly loved me. Now, it was almost over. My dream was about to come true. Back to Travis. We drove home in silence. Cassie didn't say anything either. I kept calculating Lorna's potential financial impact and pondered selling the business if needed, but not starting over with her. If I had to start over, it would be with Cassie. Back at home, we sat in the kitchen. Cassie asked, "Want some coffee?" "I'd love some," I replied. We sat silently, sipping coffee until the kids arrived home. They came straight into the kitchen. I focused on Cable. "We need to talk," I said. "I don't think so, but if you think we do," Cable replied. "Follow me into the living room," I motioned, leaving Sarah, Jeannie, and Cassie in the kitchen. Once in the living room, I asked Cable, "How much do you know?" He hesitated, then admitted, "Everything, I guess." "And what about Jeannie?" I asked. "I've known about her since 10th grade, he smirked. "You ever looked at us? Besides, Mom filled me in." "You told your mother?" I was surprised. "Yeah, but she already knew." "She didn't mention Cassie, just said she was your little playmate," Cable shrugged. "So, I guess I didn't think much of it." I was stunned. "All this time, and you knew?" "Look, Dad, it hasn't been all this time. I was in 10th grade. It's only been like 2 years. I watched you. I knew Alex knew, and soon Sarah knew too. Mom didn't care. I had to ask, does Jeannie know?" That's when I realized there was a problem. Cable took a deep breath. "She suspects something, but not that." "What's going on between you and Jeannie?" I pressed. Cable exhaled heavily. "We're serious, Dad. We love each other. Christ, you're both kids. You don't know what you want, I retorted. He stared back at me. No, Dad, I think we do. Getting frustrated, I said, I can't allow it. Cassie and I won't allow it. You're brother and sister. It's incest. It's against the law. I watched Cable closely as he prepared to respond. Was this really my son? He said, it's only incest if a lot of people know about it. So far, only a few people know. In a few weeks, we'll both be of legal age. We'll get married, and then it'll be too late. Feeling relieved, I asked cautiously, have you done anything? He laughed, easing my fears. Not a chance, not with her. Thankful for small mercies, I said, let's go back into the kitchen. Your mom will probably be here soon. Cable squeezed my hand. Dad, no matter what happens, Sarah and I have already talked. We'll still love you both. You and Mom have been good to us. So has Cassie. I thought, damn, I must have done something right. Together, we returned to the kitchen. Hell arrived in her silver BMW. Lorna parked in front of the house and stormed in like an angry mother bear ready to attack. I quickly ushered the kids and Cassie out of the kitchen. Lorna sat down, her right hand hidden in her lap beneath the table, left hand comfortably resting under her chin, index finger defiantly on her cheek. She looked at me sharply. Now you know. So, what happens next? I replied calmly, I want you to have what you want for yourself. She sneered, I want out of this marriage. This was it. I asked, are you sure? She began, Travis, I do love you, but not in the way you want me to. You're a nice guy, a great guy. You've provided well. You helped me through college and law school. But you're just not what I want anymore. Truth is, you never were. I was taken aback. I was just a help, a small help, for all her education. Damn, without me, there wouldn't have been any college. I didn't voice that thought. Instead, I asked, how long has this been going on? You and Bernie? She scoffed, me and Bernie? Travis, I was with the guy you thought was Mr. Right 2 months after we got married. Shit, Travis, don't be naive. How do you think I got through college? I'm surprised you never found out. Then again, you had your little thing, didn't you? I cut in, you found out about Cassie? She chuckled, found out? You practically announced it. Travis, Jeannie is your daughter. I knew it the moment I saw Cassie pregnant. And don't think you were fooling anyone about sending her to St. Timothy's. I checked. Little Jeannie barely had enough gumption to get through kindergarten. I know you paid her way. Actually, I was somewhat proud of that. Your affair with your pickaninny just made it easier for me to do what I wanted. I interjected, hey, come on, no need for name-calling. She laughed louder, openly mocking, whatever. Look, you don't think I earned my law degree? I slept my way through law school. Bernie's just my latest conquest. But let me tell you, he'll be my last. I'm leaving you, and Bernie and I are getting married. I was irritated, though not enough to escalate things. Still uncertain about my business, I asked cautiously, you had so little respect for me. Lorna cut me off sharply, respect? Respect is just another 7-letter word, like asshole. Respect you? I can't stand the sight of work boots. If I see another pair of overalls, I'll vomit. I can't remember the last time I saw you with clean fingernails. And for the record, you leave grease smudges on your face every time you pick your nose. I'm sick of the smell of grease. I'm grateful Cassie was around so much, she cleaned up after you. Speaking of which, every time I see you, all I think about is skid marks in the toilet, shit stains on the towels, and pee on the toilet seat because you can't remember to lift it. Her words didn't entirely surprise me. Cassie had voiced similar complaints. I resolved to stop being so unkempt. Turning back to Lorna, I asked, so, this is it? She shrugged nonchalantly, seems that way. Then I asked the big question, how do we divide things up? A genuine smile crossed her face. Bernie's friend is handling that. I chuckled. Well, that should do it. Lorna laughed again, then added more seriously, Travis, I still care about you, just not in that way. We've raised 3 great kids together. I want us to remain friends, okay? Looking out through the kitchen window, I replied softly, well, that'll mostly be up to Bernie's friend, won't it? She gave me a thoughtful smile. I don't want your business, Travis, and I certainly don't want this crappy house. That put my mind at ease. Ending the conversation, she said decisively, I'm going to pack some things now. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. We'll file for separation due to irreconcilable differences. Let's make this a clean break, Travis. And I mean it, I want us to stay friends. I got up and approached her, intending to kiss her on the lips, but she turned her head. I settled for kissing her cheek. We'll figure it out, I assured her. About an hour later, she was mostly packed and gone. Alone in the kitchen, I stood there. Cassie and the kids were still in the living room, waiting for me to call them in and say something. I took a moment to reflect. It was sad, ending a relationship of 25 years, counting high school and all. But then there was Cassie, my Cassie, who had been with me almost as long as Lorna, if I counted our time together in high school. I remember dancing with her at homecoming. I asked her once if she remembered. I wasn't sure, but she said she did. I realized all that remained was Jeannie, how to handle breaking the news to Cable and her without causing too much harm. I called the kids and Cassie back into the room. Cassie came over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Are you okay? She asked softly. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm good, I replied, then turned to Jeannie. Jeannie, honey, please sit down. I gestured to a chair, and she complied. Cassie, Cable, Jeannie, and I gathered around. Cassie began, Jeannie, honey, there's something important you need to know. But Cable interrupted her, wait a minute. He quickly left the room and returned with the dining room mirror. Sitting down beside Jeannie, he handed me the mirror and said, Dad, you do the honors. I held up the mirror so both kids could see their reflections side by side. Sarah stood quietly behind them. Cable asked gently, see anything, sweetheart? When he called her sweetheart, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. I glanced at Cassie. She was already crying. Jeannie looked at their images in the mirror. No, just us, she replied. Cable persisted, take a closer look. Reluctantly, Jeannie examined the reflection more closely. Cable asked again, see anything now? She shook her head slowly. It became clear to all of us that she had realized the truth as well. Denying it, she turned to Cable. No, I don't see anything special, just the two of us. Cable couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. Jeannie, we look alike. We look almost exactly alike, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. Jeannie, you're my sister. My dad and your mom, we're. Jeannie abruptly stood from her chair and fled from the room. She had a room in the house where she sought refuge. In my mind, I thought, good Lord, what could be worse than this? Time moved swiftly after that. The die had been cast, and Jeannie secluded herself in her room for 3 weeks. It disrupted the final days of her school program, but we decided to let her determine when she was ready to emerge. Eventually, she returned, resumed her studies, and completed her program. Academic honors weren't expected, but we were relieved she was back on track. Throughout it all, Sarah remained Jeannie's steadfast support. Sarah stopped hiding their relationship, boldly declaring to everyone that they were sisters, fiercely defending Jeannie against any negativity. I felt a swell of pride for her. Despite her earlier behavior, she really stepped up for Jeannie. Nevertheless, Sarah continued her promiscuous lifestyle. I had hoped Cable would remain a stable presence, but he took the revelation as hard as Jeannie did. He packed up his belongings, drove off in his Malibu, withdrew his savings from the bank, and disappeared. However, he didn't go too far. I discovered he was in Milford, Delaware, and decided to pay him a visit. During our conversation, I told him firmly, you know you won't graduate. He nodded solemnly, I can take the GED. I inquired, do you have any plans? He gave me a look as though I were from Mars. I'm going to work for you, he stated firmly. That made me feel relieved. It seemed his running away was just a temporary phase. What about Jeannie? I pressed. He shrugged. What about her? He replied nonchalantly. Are you too? I hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't know, he admitted, then met my gaze. What does she want? I replied with certainty, you know what she wants. He fell silent for a moment, a thoughtful smile crossing his face. Tell Jeannie to hold on, he finally said. I assured him that I would. Bernie actually did us a favor with the divorce settlement. Surprisingly, for a man who stole another's wife, he turned out to be decent about it. Then again, I couldn't really claim he stole something that was already lost. Bernie seemed eager to marry Lorna quickly, so he pushed for a swift and amicable divorce to avoid court. I was grateful for that. I retained ownership of my business and the house. We split our savings 50-50, and since I had a substantial 401k while she didn't have much, I sweetened the deal by giving her half of mine. Bernie chuckled at my gesture, telling me it wasn't necessary, that it was just money. But to me, it meant more than that. The divorce was finalized surprisingly quickly, much faster than I had anticipated. Later that summer, I decided to propose to Cassie. She said yes. I wanted to make the proposal special. Even though we were already living together, I drove her back to her parents' house. We brought Jeannie along. By then, Sarah was preparing for college and had decided on the University of Maryland at College Park, abandoning her earlier plans of Hawaii and surfing. I was fully supportive of her decision, and I think she was genuinely excited about it too. We all piled into the car and headed over to Cassie's parents' place. I walked in and, in front of everyone, me, a 39-year-old man, asked the septuagenarian if I could marry his 35-year-old daughter. The old man teared up. I was overjoyed. It was the best thing I could have done. He even said yes. Then, I knelt down, presented the ring to Cassie, and she allowed me to slip it onto her finger. Her mom was crying, Jeannie was crying, Cassie was crying, Sarah was crying, heck, we were all crying. Especially me. We tied the knot on Labor Day weekend. Cassie's father proudly escorted her down the aisle. Sarah and Jeannie were among the 6 bridesmaids. The church was packed. Since cable was still off the grid, I asked Alex to stand as my best man. The guy didn't even know his parents were split up. He seemed more interested in quantum mechanics anyway. It was a beautiful wedding. I hadn't realized Cassie and her family were Presbyterian. I had always assumed all African Americans were Methodists. If I had known, maybe I would have tried to be a better person, especially with the whole John Calvin thing and all. It truly was a wonderful wedding, the one thing was missing. However, that changed the moment we stepped out of the church. There, right on the sidewalk, stood Cable, dressed to the nines in a tuxedo like the rest of us. He paid no mind to anyone else. He walked straight up to Jeannie, dropped down on one knee, and proposed. We were all taken aback. Of course, she said yes. The half-sibling relationship didn't matter to them at all. And now, for an epilogue. We were all invited to Bernie and Lorna's wedding. They opted for a civil ceremony. Lorna couldn't go Jewish, being too Baptist, and Bernie couldn't go Baptist, being too Jewish. So, Lorna got her wealthy and successful businessman, and Bernie, the frequent divorcee, got his third non-Jewish wife. They both seemed genuinely happy. I wondered how long Bernie would manage to keep her around. Cassie and I, after 19 years together, finally tied the knot, and we were happy. Her parents seemed content. Her 3 brothers served as ushers. Sarah ended up not going as far away from home as she initially planned, attending the University of Maryland at College Park instead. Meanwhile, Jeannie and Cable have been making plans. He promised to work and send her to college, but she made it clear that wouldn't happen on her terms. So, who came out on top? Well, maybe nobody did, or perhaps we all did in our own way. Isn't that how life often unfolds? As long as Jeannie and Cable don't end up with any unusual offspring, everything should be fine. Of course, I'd never say something like that aloud. I'm just grateful I finally have my little munchkin, and I think she's pretty happy too. At least, she says she is. We cuddle every night. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.